So in 2016, artist and theologian Tricia Hersey founded the NAP ministry. Yes, NAP, N-A-P, those delicious moments of daytime rest that are a standard part of life for the youngest and oldest among us, but which often elude the vast majority of working adults because in our society, too much rest is associated with laziness, weakness, lack of productivity. Hersey coins herself the NAP bishop, and she and her team curate collective napping experiences for churches and other community groups, complete with lush pillows, cozy blankets, meditative sounds and smells. If you go to her website, the photo on the front page is of Hersey herself reclining on a beautiful outdoor swing, eyes closed, adorned in flowing fabrics, flowers at her feet. It's all incredibly sweet. But it's no joke. Hersey founded this ministry, and I invite you to get her book or look at her book after the service. She founded this ministry as a Black woman, ever too aware of the ways that work and the drive for productivity has been used to subjugate, demean, enslave Black bodies throughout all of American history. Rest is resistance, she claims, in the face of unimaginable systems of oppression like chattel slavery, Jim Crow, or capitalism. Taking time to rest and creating space for others to rest is not only crucial for survival, it is one of the most radical and subversive things any of us can do. To rest in a society that assigns value based on how hard we are able to work and how much we are able to do is to declare freedom from that world. It is to say, even though we live in this world, we will not let our value be defined by it. I think Jesus was reaching into the future to channel Tricia Hersey and the wisdom of Black women across millennia in his exchange with Pilate in our gospel reading for today. In the passage, Jesus is being interrogated. Pilate was the Roman governor of Judea, tasked with the responsibility of overseeing the health of Roman rule in that region, which meant making sure that everyone was following the laws, paying taxes, staying productively engaged, and ensuring that there was peace among the many different ethnic and religious minorities that existed at the time. Jesus had been betrayed by one of his own followers, arrested by Roman guards, and now he was being questioned. Pilate didn't care about Jesus or any of the Jews who followed him, and he didn't care if Jesus thought he was a king or a unicorn or anything else. The question for Pilate was, does Jesus pose a threat to the peace and stability of Rome, either on his own or because he was stirring up too much controversy among the people? The exchange itself is kind of comical. Are you the king of the Jews? Pilate asks. Jesus evades the question, but then he says a bunch of stuff about his kingdom. So you are a king, Pilate says. In her newest book, Tricia Hersey writes about the power of trickster energy. Trickster energy is the subtle and not so subtle ways that those without positional power thwart the orders, assumptions, and norms of those in charge. The Bible is full of tricksters, and scholars have acknowledged this for a long time. It's Jacob stealing the birthright from Esau. It's Moses' mother sending him down the river so he'd float right by Pharaoh's home. It's Naomi telling Ruth to lie down on the threshing floor. And it's Jesus standing in front of Pilate in the moments before he is executed, saying, "You say that I'm a king." But Hersey not only acknowledges the trickster energy, she embraces it as a tool and tactic for our times. To be a trickster, she says, is to live in two different worlds. Does that sound familiar? Jesus tells Pilate that his kingdom is not from this world. For centuries, Christians have understood that to mean that Jesus was focused on the afterlife. But those who are trapped under the yoke of oppressive systems in this world have always understood it differently. Jesus saw the world for what it was. He saw Rome for what it was. And though he lived in that world and was subject to it, even unto death, he didn't let it define him or his mission on earth. He refused to belong to a world, to a system that did not prioritize the thriving of God's people or of God's creation. This is what it meant for Jesus to be fully human and fully divine, to be in this world and yet not of this world. And this is what it means for us to be people of faith today, to understand that while we live in this world and are subject to it in so many ways, we do not belong to it. We belong to each other. We belong to God. We belong to a world, a way of being that sees our value for what it is, that knows that we are loved, that we are good, and that we are enough. The time ahead will likely be hard. And just keep saying that. It may be scary for many of us. Some of us will be targets of policies and practices of the next administration. Others of us may stand to benefit, at least on the surface, from the rhetoric of white supremacy and male dominance, from economic policies that will put more money in some of our pockets. We don't know exactly how the future will look. But let's be clear. For us, any world that does not root itself first in the wonderful, radical, transformational, healing love of Jesus is not our world. And none of us actually benefit from a world that is cruel and oppressive, because a world that values the lives of some over the lives of others degrades all of our souls. The question for us in the time ahead will be twofold. And let me just say also, to be clear, that this presidential election has not changed anything about what our faith means or what it calls us to do. But there is an urgency now, an opportunity to step forward and use this moment to embrace the love and way of Jesus with even more passion than before. So here's the question. How are we going to build the resilience to get through this time together, to keep our dignity and our humanity and our connections to God and each other intact through this time? And second, how are we going to resist the pulls and pressures of this world? How are we going to root our belonging instead in the world to which Jesus calls us? How are we going to channel our own trickster energy to subvert the forces that seek to demean and divide us, and instead to find rest, to claim joy, to declare freedom? How will we build resilience, and how will we practice resistance? To live in two different worlds does not mean that we should disengage from this world. We have to see it for what it is, and we have to remember that it does not define us or determine our worth. At times, social movements have been about gaining power and status and wealth for those who have been marginalized. But social movements rooted in faith have always understood that there is a greater task at hand. Yes, we need to struggle for justice and equity within the structures of this world. We need to ensure food for the hungry, welcome for the stranger, justice for the captives. But we also need to remember that we belong to a world that is already just, in which we already have everything we need, in which all people are already free. That is the tension and the power of our faith. We live in two worlds. We'll navigate the world together out there, but in here, we'll build the world we know is possible. Hersey says that resistance is not only about opposing the world out there, it's about claiming the world in here. She advocates rest as the primary form of resistance, not only because it puts a cog in the myth of productivity, but because rest is a generative state. It opens our minds to creativity and possibility. It gives way to hope. In order to build the world we know is possible, we have to care for our souls and our bodies. We have to care for each other. There is no other way. After Jesus' exchange with Pilate, he goes on trial. He's beaten, humiliated, and crucified, scorned and betrayed by the powers of the world. His followers didn't understand what was happening. They couldn't imagine all that had been lost. They were afraid and confused and defeated. But we know how the story ends. 3 days later, the same women who had watched him hang on a cross go to the tomb, because even though their friend and teacher had died, they weren't going to give up on him or on each other. And what they discover when they roll back the stone is that Jesus has risen. Talk about the ultimate trickster move. This is our faith. This is our world. We claim peace in the face of violence. We claim hope in the face of fear. We claim freedom in the face of captivity. And we claim life even in the face of death. Together, we will build resilience. We can practice resistance rooted in love for God, for ourselves, for our neighbors, for creation. And then we'll let our love give way to hope. Hope for the world we know is possible. Hope for the world that is already here among us through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Hope for the world that knows our worth, that thrives on our joy and creativity. Hope for the world that needs us, all of us, just as we are. Amen.